couple of months before I started working on Jimmy Hollywood, although I continued to mentor Norma Perez, my involvement with Colours United and the other teenagers had pretty much run its course. My friend Sally, who was a social worker specialising in adoptions, suggested I might want to apply to be a volunteer at Hollygrove, formerly known as the Los Angeles Orphans Home, which was in West Hollywood. In the 1930s, an 8-year-old girl by the name of Norma Jean Baker, later better known as Marilyn Monroe, had lived there for 2 years, but that was well before my time. This home for abandoned and abused children aged 5 to 14 had what was called a special friend program, which had been created to give them a connection with an adult who could be there for them, and which eventually might lead to a fostering situation. I applied, and after taking various child study courses at Hollygrove, lasting several weeks, and undergoing an intensive vetting process, I was approved. The special friend coordinator at Hollygrove soon matched me up with a 6-year-old African-American boy, Jay Don, born to a drug-addicted mother who was unable to care for him. As a result of her addiction, it's thought that she'd been a regular user of crack cocaine. Jadon had been born with drugs in his system. As special friends, we weren't given too much information about a child's early life, so that we weren't influenced or perhaps said something to the child that might have been untoward. I understood that to a certain extent, but later had a problem with this lack of information. Now, all I knew about Jadon was that he had ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and was a handful. After spending time with him at Hollygrove, bonding and becoming aware of how energetic this little boy was, bouncing off the walls comes to mind, I was then allowed to take him out for the day. I made a commitment to see Jadon every Saturday from noon to 7 p.m, although the visit could be shorter if I experienced any problems with the little guy. On the first day, as he settled into my car, I asked him where he wanted to go, and he said, "Your house." I expected him to say Disneyland or McDonald's. At this time, in 1993, home visits were allowed, but I'm sorry to say that 8 years later they were discontinued because of a volunteer's suspected inappropriate behaviour with one of the children. But in those simpler, more innocent days, and before children with more extreme behaviour were residents at Hollygrove, it seemed clear to me that the children craved a real home environment and perhaps a sense of stability. On his first visit to my home, I was very surprised when Jadon asked if he could make spaghetti and sauce, which I luckily happened to have in my cupboard. I wrapped him in an apron, and he proceeded to show me how to make the pasta dish, which was basically boiling the pasta and heating up the sauce. Naturally, I made sure he was safely away from the boiling water and the stove. The thing is that Jadon didn't actually want to eat the cooked spaghetti. It seemed to me that he was just interested in the process. Perhaps it was a memory from another time that gave him comfort, or maybe it was just that he wanted to do something different. Regardless of the reason, he was focusing on a task and completing it, which I thought was pretty good for a child with ADHD. As time went on, it seemed that Jadon was happy doing as many chores as I allowed him to do, with my supervision, of course. We made cookies, cleaned, shopped, and did laundry. He loved doing simple, everyday things, and especially enjoyed washing the dishes. I'd stand him on a stool at the kitchen sink and fill it full of dishwashing liquid, and he was in his element playing in the bubbles. It reminded me of when I was Jadon's age, and my dad used to take me on his bike to my Auntie Ina's house in Coventry. As soon as I got there, I wanted to wash the dishes, Ah, the allure of bubbles for getting the job done. Answering the phone was also big on Jadon's list when he was at my house, something else he wasn't able to do at the children's home. One day, he asked me what it would be like to take the handle off my bedroom door. I don't know, but do you want to have a go? Yes, I can hear you saying, Marie, what were you thinking? But quite honestly, I was intrigued by his interest in wanting to remove the door handle. And I was also curious to see if this little boy with ADHD would be capable of concentrating on such a task. So I gave him a screwdriver, first loosening the screws slightly to give him a head start, and he knelt on the floor working away until he'd taken the handle off the door. Then he jumped up. Can we go swimming now? Not until you've screwed the handle back on the door, I told him. Of course, he had absolutely no interest in doing that, although he did try for 2 seconds before I took over. Naturally, it wasn't all work, and we had lots of fun at the beach, going to the movies, the park, friends, kids' parties, San Diego Zoo with friends, and of course, McDonald's, and eventually Disneyland. Saturdays spent with Jadon were definitely full on, and sometimes it was hard work, but I never missed a visit. After filming of Jimmy Hollywood had wrapped, I was out of work for a while. One day I got a call from Diana Levinson, who was good friends with Dustin Hoffman's wife, Lisa. She'd mentioned to Diana that Dustin was in the process of converting a romantic novel into a screenplay, but was having difficulty with it. Diana suggested that I might be able to help. And the next day, Dustin called and invited me to meet him at his house in Brentwood, not far from where I lived, in Santa Monica. Murray Shiskel, who was a well-known New York playwright and had co-written the film Tootsie, was at Dustin's house and had been working with him on this new screenplay that Dustin intended to direct, which was about married lawyers. It was a pretty hectic environment because Dustin's office was in his home with his staff of assistants, as well as his wife's brother, Lee Gottsagen, the producer of the project. Every now and again, Lisa Hoffman would pop her head into our writing session, and his kids would wander in occasionally. There was never a dull moment. It was fun, and although at times it was hard to concentrate, I enjoyed working with Dustin and Murray. When it was lunchtime, Dustin often cooked pasta, which was always good. On a couple of occasions, he ordered food from a restaurant, and I remember one of the delivery guys had a shock when Dustin answered the door to accept the food. "Oh my God, it's Dustin Hoffman," he said. After a week, Murray returned to New York while I continued developing the script with Dustin. It was going really well, and Dustin asked if I could work with him on Saturday. I told him that I couldn't do that. "Why not?" the acclaimed actor demanded, light-heartedly. "Because I have another commitment." "But I'm Dustin Hoffman. Who could be more important than me?" he joked. "A 6-year-old boy in a children's home," I told him. That stopped him in his tracks. He wanted to know more. After I'd explained my special friend relationship with Jadon, Dustin said, "Don't get hurt, Marie." A year later, when Jadon went to live with his grandmother in Nashville, I was happy that he was going to be with his family, and I did visit him there. The hurt came 3 years later, when another very special child from Hollygrove, who I was in the process of fostering, was reunited with the mother who'd abandoned him 5 years earlier. But that's a story for another time. If you're enjoying my episodes, my social media guru, Horatio, has asked that you please like the recordings, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when I post my next episode on Sunday. Many thanks, and your support is greatly appreciated.